Welcome back, everyone, to the 11th video in this series of research methodology, titled The Objectives of Science and Social Science Research. I'm absolutely thrilled you're here today because, well, we're tackling something massive. Something so foundational that literally everything else in your future study hinges on it. We're talking about how to construct a research problem. Now, whether you're a totally fresh, novice investigator just stepping into the academic arena, or maybe you're a seasoned scholar looking to sharpen up your approach, mastering this one specific skill, that is the dividing line. It's what separates a vague, rambling, wandering study from a razor-sharp, incredibly impactful discovery. Trust me, setting up your research problem correctly right now is going to save you months, maybe even literally years of frustration and dead ends down the line. So let's not waste any time. Let's get right to it.
Okay, let's dive into this. And there's really no better place to start than with Fred Kerlinger. He beautifully noted that the problem is the heart of research, for without a clear problem, there can be no research. I mean, think about that metaphor for a second. The heart, exactly like a beating human heart. Without it, the entire body of your investigation just dies. It simply cannot survive. If your research problem isn't carefully, meticulously formulated at the very beginning of your journey, your study is at massive risk. It risks becoming totally irrelevant, or methodologically weak, or honestly, just plain confusing to anyone who picks it up to read. A research problem isn't just some broad topic you feel like casually reading about on a rainy Sunday afternoon, right? No. It is a highly specific issue that demands rigorous, systematic investigation. It's the thing that gives you your boundaries. It sets your entire direction. And crucially, it ensures that all this sweat and time you're pouring into your work is actually contributing to the advancement of human knowledge.
So to make this incredibly straightforward for us today, we are going to follow an architect's blueprint for this explainer. First, we look at the heart of research. Second, mapping the landscape. Third, defining the gap. Then fourth, framing the statement. Fifth, feasibility and ethics. And finally, number 6, translating to questions. All right, moving right into phase 1 of our blueprint, the heart of research, starting wide.
You know, every single great study, no matter how ridiculously complex it ends up being in the final paper, starts as a broad area of interest. It just does. This could come from your daily professional practice, maybe a big societal concern you've noticed, or honestly just pure, unadulterated personal curiosity. As the great researcher John Creswell notes, you actually have to start wide. You need to anchor yourself in the big picture before you can effectively narrow things down. Let's use a running example today, okay? Imagine your broad topic of interest is online learning. Now, if you just go to an academic database and literally type in online learning, you are going to be absolutely drowned. I'm talking millions of results. It is way too vast. You can't just research online learning as a whole entity, but it is a vital entry point. From that massive, general area, you start to gradually narrow it down. Okay, so are you interested in student performance? Or maybe engagement? Or what about retention rates? By starting wide, you're basically giving yourself the breathing room to explore and situate your inquiry within a familiar context before you zoom in on the granular specifics. So remember, starting wide isn't a mistake. It's a totally necessary reconnaissance mission.
Okay, phase 2, mapping the landscape, the scaffolding of literature.
So to build a truly solid research house, you first have to look at what other scholars have already built on the property. C.R. Kothahari has this beautiful description where he calls the literature review the scaffolding on which research problems are built. I absolutely love this architectural metaphor. I mean, you wouldn't try to build a heavy roof midair without first putting up the scaffolding in the load-bearing walls, right? It's the same here. A research problem has to be grounded in existing knowledge. Through systematic, careful reading, you uncover what has already been studied. You find out what weird contradictions are still floating around in the field. And perhaps most importantly, you prevent yourself from simply duplicating existing knowledge. Guys, there is literally nothing worse for a researcher than spending a whole year on a passionate project only to realize some other team answered the exact same question a decade ago. It's a nightmare. For instance, if you read the literature on our online learning example, you might sift through thousands of papers obsessing over test scores. But wait a second, you might realize almost nobody's talking about how online learning affects a student's psychological well-being. Boom! That scaffolding just gave you the perfect vantage point to see exactly what is missing.
Moving on to phase 3, defining the gap, finding the missing piece. Now, this is the part where you get to put on your detective hat. As Ranjit Kumar insists, recognizing a research gap is absolutely non-negotiable, period.
A research gap is simply an area where existing studies are insufficient. Maybe they're totally inconsistent, or they're just wildly outdated. Identifying this gap is the one thing that guarantees your research is going to add original value, rather than just acting as an echo chamber for what we already universally know. You aren't just summarizing the past here. You are actively trying to solve a problem that is currently holding your academic field back. Let me be clear, if there is no gap, there is no real need for your research. It is honestly that simple, and it's that dramatic. You are actively hunting for the void.
Let's apply this detective work to our online learning example. So, say your deep dive into the literature review showed that prior studies really heavily emphasize cognitive performance, things like standardized test scores or grade point averages. And it makes sense, right? Those are super easy to measure, so everyone studies them. But you suddenly notice that all these studies totally gloss over the socio-emotional factors of sitting alone behind a screen all day. Guess what? You've just found your gap. It is a sheer lack of studies on the impact of peer interaction on motivation in online education. Finding this is a massive, massive eureka moment. By shifting your focus away from those heavily saturated cognitive metrics and looking directly at these completely overlooked socio-emotional factors, you instantly create a highly novel research opportunity. The field is hungry for this exact data, and you, my friend, have just found your missing piece of the puzzle.
This brings us to phase 4, framing the statement, articulating the issue.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how structural it is. Scholars Best and Kahn actually argue that a well-stated problem means the research is already half completed. Half completed. Why would they say that? Because these 4 distinct pillars on your screen interlock to create an absolutely unshakable foundation for your study. A really strong problem statement must have, number 1, the context of the issue. Number 2, the specific variables or phenomena you are studying. Number 3, the population or scope of interest. And number 4, the critical need for the investigation. These are literal load-bearing pillars. If you are missing even a single one of these, your entire study is going to wobble like a cheap table. Think about it. If you have variables but absolutely no specific population, you won't know who on earth to sample or survey when it comes time to actually collect your data. Or if you have a population but no clear context, your final findings won't mean anything to the wider academic community. They have to work together perfectly. Let's look at how this magic actually comes together in practice. Here's a statement. Despite increased adoption of online learning, little is known about the influence of peer interaction on student motivation among undergraduate learners. Okay? Notice how brilliantly this combines all 4 pillars into one single cohesive sentence. First, what is our context? It's the increased adoption of online learning. Right. Second, what are the specific variables? Well, we are looking at peer interaction and student motivation. Third, who exactly is our population? Undergraduate learners. And finally, what is the need? Little is known about. That right there is our research gap. In just one elegantly crafted, punchy sentence, any reader, any peer reviewer, or any funding committee knows exactly what you are doing, exactly who you are doing it with, and exactly why it critically matters. It's a thing of beauty.
All right, phase 5, feasibility and ethics, keeping it realistic and right.
Now, as scholars Newman and Punch highlight in the literature, your grand ambition as a researcher must absolutely be tempered by cold, hard reality. Take a wildly unworkable, overly broad question like, what factors influence global education outcomes? I mean, it sounds incredibly important, doesn't it? Very noble? But really think about it for a second. Do you, as a single researcher or maybe a small team, do you have infinite funding? Do you have decades of spare time? Do you have global data access to every school on Earth to answer that? No way. It's way, way too broad to be actionable. Instead, look at this feasible alternative. Does the number of discussion board posts predict motivation among first-year engineering students? Look at how beautifully precise that is. It is highly measurable. You can realistically get that exact data within a single college semester. You can actually complete that study. You see, you always have to strike a careful balance between your grand academic ambitions and ground-level practical reality.
But hey, it's not just about what is practically feasible with your time and budget. It's also about what is ethically and socially relevant. First and foremost, you must avoid harm or exploitation. That means ensuring absolute ethical integrity in exactly how you treat your human subjects or your data. You also want to passionately pursue broad social relevance while actively, intentionally avoiding trivial issues. Why does this matter so much? Well, because researching trivialities, like, gathering endless data on whether students prefer red or blue notebooks, is essentially just data collection for the sake of data collection. It totally wastes your time and it wastes vital academic resources. But investigating something like the impact of peer isolation on student motivation, now that carries genuine social and theoretical significance. That actually moves the needle. As Keith Punch notes, ethical and social feasibility is just as vital as practical feasibility. At the end of the day, you want to ensure your rigorous, hard work contributes positively and meaningfully to society. Which leads us to our final phase, Phase 6, translating to questions, making it operational.
Let's move to this slide and see how this all builds together. According to scholar Donna Mertens, your central problem must now be broken down into specific, investigable components. This translation process is what turns a big theoretical statement into an actionable, boots-on-the-ground methodology. So, you start with step 1, your formal problem statement, which, as we saw, we already built. Then you move to step 2, you formulate your objectives. These are usually stated with strong, clear action verbs like to determine, to examine, or to analyze. And finally, step 3, you generate specific research questions. Think of this as a funnel. It takes your high-level academic goal and literally turns it into the exact granular questions you are going to try to answer through your data collection and statistical analysis.
Returning to our trusty online learning example one last time, let's look at the operational research questions that naturally emerge from that funnel we've been building throughout this whole explainer. 1. What role does peer interaction play in online student motivation? 2. How do levels of peer interaction differ by course type or platform? And 3. To what extent can peer engagement predict persistence in online programs? You see how these specific questions parallel your broader objectives? They give you a crystal-clear roadmap for your methodology. If you ask these specific micro-questions in your surveys or your interviews, you can definitively answer them. And by answering these 3 small, highly targeted questions, you mathematically add up the evidence needed to solve the big, intimidating, overarching problem that we started with. It is all about breaking the monster down into manageable, bite-sized pieces.
But remember, even the absolute best formulated research problem benefits from a trial run. Creswell strongly advises using an iterative process. Basically, you want to continually refine your problem through peer feedback and pilot studies to test its true viability before you make a massive, full commitment of your resources. Running a tiny, low-stakes pilot survey on online motivation, for example, is just a fine-tuning exercise. But it is so valuable. It can reveal major, glaring flaws in how you worded your questions, or it might show you unexpected roadblocks in how you actually plan to collect the data. Catching these mechanical issues early on in a small pilot study, that saves you from massive risks, wasted funding, and intense headaches later on. Good science is all about refinement and adjustment.
So, as you wrap up today, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. What broad interest of yours is hiding a critical, unexplored gap, just waiting for you to define it? Think about it. We've journeyed all the way from chaotic, overwhelming topics through the critical scaffolding of literature down to razor-sharp, highly actionable research questions. The architect's blueprint is now yours to use. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer on constructing a research problem. If you found this insightful and helpful for your own academic journey, please take a quick moment to like, comment, share, and absolutely subscribe to the channel so you never miss an update in our ongoing research methodology series. Happy researching, everyone, and I will see you in the next one.